Another person stopping to say hi and seeing what I'm up to. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm out and about this afternoon. Look at the snow's all gone. Well, almost all gone anyway. Little bit of wind today, still a little bit of cool in the air, but I'm so happy to be out and about. As I'm driving down the back roads this afternoon, I'm passing people and we're kicking up the dust and the gravel, and it brought into mind the stone chips in my windshields of my past two vehicles. Oh, not to mention the headlight that I ruined also. And I thought, you know what, today might be a good day actually to have that conversation on road safety. Maybe give you a few tips that I've learned along the way. I've basically covered this province at least 3 times in my lifetime, and I think I've learned a little bit. My dad actually taught me how to drive, and we spent a lot of time out in the back roads, and hopefully I absorbed a few of his tips, and I'd like to pass that along if I can. Usually when I'm driving down the back roads, I'm usually driving in the groove lines of the tires right down the center of the gravel road. And if somebody's coming towards me, I want to move over, but at the same time, I want to make sure that the person who's coming towards me is also taking a bit of that responsibility of moving over, right? Because the last thing you want to do is have a big truck drive by. You've ended up rolling over into the ditch because you moved over too far, and he's carried on, not realizing that you've gotten yourself into a bit of trouble, right? So it's always good to make sure that you're each sharing the road. You want to take your foot off the accelerator as you're passing each other. You do not want to be ruining people's cars with these stones. It's not fun. So you know what? Just do your fair share. The roads are wide enough for 2 vehicles to get by each other, no problems. And most roads are like that in Manitoba. We have really, really excellent roads. Not so much in the city, but the countryside, yes, they have very good roads out here. Cross my fingers, I have never been in an accident out in the countryside. I do play it really safe because I do realize I'm usually out there on my own. When I was a kid, my dad would pack us up into the car every Sunday and we'd take off for country drives. My mom would pack us a lunch, and there was always a promise of a nice dinner in some small town or village along the way. We absolutely just loved it. But it was my parents' way of, finding out what was going on with us kids. They had 4 girls and we would all be in the back seat fighting with each other. But at the same time, we were staying tight, right? Because my parents would find out how we were doing in school, how we were getting along with the other kids. They'd find out if we had any little issues that maybe they would have to take care of, right? It's not like we can escape from the car. Things are a little bit different now with the social media. The kids probably sit in the back seat and play on the phone. But you know what? That's even better for the parents because we drove our parents absolutely crazy with all the fighting that we did, eh? My dad told amazing stories. He made a point of finding out the history and stuff and tell us wonderful stories. He'd make games for us to, certain animals would be worth a certain amount of money, and, by the end of the trip, you would find out how much money you would have for candy when you got home. Yeah, we loved our country drives. Also, you want to leave each other enough space, especially if you're driving behind somebody. They're kicking up that gravel. It could be like you're driving in fog, and you never know what's in front of you. He could pass by, and as soon as he's passed by, a deer could cross by the road, but you don't see him because it's just a big cloud of gravel, right? So keep that in mind. Actually, when you're driving, you should always drive when you're in the countryside. Always drive as if there's something right around the corner, We don't clear the roads like we do in the city. There could be fallen trees. There could be animals crossing the roads. There could be horseback riders. June and July are big berry picking days here in Manitoba. And families, they like to get together and do this as a family event. And you'll find little kids, crossing these. You could be out absolutely nowhere, and all of a sudden a toddler could be, running across the road. And that's because the families are picking berries, right? So you always want to be mindful of that. Also, a lot of deer here in Manitoba. People, when they're driving down the roads at a high speed, they have these tendencies to want to steer and do sharp turns when they come across these deers. And you got to keep in mind it's your safety. These deers, you hear that phrase, a deer in the headlights. And that's because sometimes the headlights kind of give the animals these little hypnotized episodes, right? And they just freeze up on the roads. And sometimes you just don't see them in time. Sometimes you just have a split second to maybe get your foot off that accelerator a little bit, but it's always best. I mean, if you've got to drive through a deer, you've got to drive through the deer. Yeah, I would be absolutely heartbroken to hear that somebody swerved hard and ended up rolling in a ditch. You also want to keep in mind that we were a distribution hub of Canada here. We have old rail lines absolutely everywhere as they're crossing the roads, right? So sometimes when you're driving down a road and you'll see the road start to rise a little bit, you want to make sure that you're going slow when you're coming up through this rise, because what could happen is it could be an old rail line that's crossing the road and it's actually going to sharp like this. So if you're going at a high speed and you hit this, it's like a ramp and you end up doing like a Starsky and Hutch move. And if your front tires hit the ground first, wow, I mean, you could flip your car. It's happened to me a couple of times. It's pretty scary when it does happen. But just keep that in mind. When you come to these little rides, it's always best to just bring your speed down a little bit. And you're driving down the road, sometimes you'll see these, 75-foot or 100-foot patches on the gravel, and it's discolored a little bit. And that's because the residents have actually laid down a chemical onto the gravel so it doesn't kick up that dust into the air. It's always good practice, when you drive by these houses, to bring your speed down again, just to make it so that dust doesn't kick up in the air. You want to keep in mind that those wives are inside there trying to keep their houses clean, right? And, they could be airing out their houses and have their windows open or what have you. Quite often your speed limits will be 80 or 100. Just because those speed limits are high, that doesn't mean that you have to drive those speed limits. It's always better to be safe than sorry. If you see oncoming traffic, you're slowing other people up. All you have to do is move over a little bit, let them have the chance to pass you on by. When you're dealing with tractors and stuff, obviously tractors are slow. Most people out here are really easygoing when it comes to those tractors, and they'll take their tractors and they'll move it over a little bit so that you can pass them. But there's no need to be honking your horn or making a fuss because somebody's going a little bit slower. I mean, a tractor obviously is not driving into the city. So if you just practice a little bit of patience, that person will probably turn into a field or turn into their home, shortly anyway. When driving down the back roads, there's nothing more important to have than your first aid kit. That should be in your vehicle at all times. And actually, if you don't have a first aid kit, I'm actually going to leave a link below in my description. You can go ahead and click on that, and that'll take you to I'll put a couple of options for first aid kits there. I've got a couple hours before the sun goes down. I want to stick around and see a beautiful sunset tonight. But that was a little bit unplanned, it gives me the incentive to go home and maybe delve into the topic a little bit more. And, maybe we can have this conversation again at some point. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, maybe now would be the good time to do that. Also, if you hit the notification bell, you'll get an email the next time I upload. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great night. Drive safe, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.